Seducing women is a social game, and like every game, it exists even if nobody explains it. It doesn't need you to agree with it to work. It works anyway. The most common mistake is believing seduction depends on lines, quick tactics, or some special personality. None of that is the core. The core is understanding the frame you're operating in. When you don't see the game, you react. When you see it, you choose. The game starts long before you speak. It starts in how you position yourself mentally. If you enter from expectation, from hope that it goes well, you're already playing in survival mode. The correct frame isn't trying to be liked, it's exploring. You're not looking for approval. You're evaluating connection. You're not chasing validation. You're observing compatibility. That simple internal shift completely changes your external behavior, even before you say a single word. Here's the first real hack. Seduction doesn't happen when you perform. It happens when you stop acting from need. The game rewards the man who doesn't depend on the immediate outcome. When your emotional state isn't tied to her response, you transmit something rare and powerful: inner freedom. And inner freedom is one of the strongest signals of social value. The frame of the game also means understanding that not everything is literal. Interactions are full of subtext, soft tests, micro challenges, emotional readings. It's not about winning arguments or proving you're intelligent, it's about maintaining emotional coherence. You don't win the game by impressing. You win the game by holding your center while everything around you moves. Another key point about the frame: not every move is offensive. Sometimes the best move is not making a move at all. Knowing when to speak, when to stay quiet, when to pull back, and when to move forward is more important than any verbal technique. Silence in this game isn't emptiness, it's information, it's space, it's potential tension. The man who understands this stops over-explaining and starts communicating through presence. The typical mistake is believing seduction is about convincing. It's not. Convincing creates resistance. The real game works through resonance. If you force it, you lose. If you flow from a solid position, you attract. The correct frame eliminates the inner struggle. You're not competing with other men. You're calibrating whether the dynamic even makes sense for you. There's also an invisible rule almost nobody mentions. The game punishes inconsistency. If you say you're calm, but you act anxious, if you say you don't care, but you react like you care too much, the frame breaks. Not because she catches you, but because the energy stops being clean. Attraction needs congruence more than perfection. Understanding the frame means stopping the romantic fantasy of seduction and starting to see it as a conscious emotional exchange. It's not manipulation, it's reading. It's not control, it's self-control. It's not cold strategy, it's clarity. When you know where you stand, you stop improvising from fear and start improvising from choice. And here's the final point of this frame. The game is not played to win someone. It's played so you don't lose yourself. The moment you sacrifice your center for attention, the game kicks you out. The moment you stay grounded, even without immediate results, the game starts working in your favor. That's the real beginning of the cheat code. In seduction, it doesn't matter what you think you're communicating, it matters what the other person interprets. You can have the best intentions in the world and still project insecurity, urgency, or neediness. The game doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards congruence between what you feel, what you do, and what people perceive. This is one of the most uncomfortable hacks to accept because it removes the internal excuse of, "I tried to do it right." Perception is formed in seconds and adjusted through constant micro signals. Your posture, your speaking rhythm, your pauses, how you react to an unexpected comment. Everything communicates more than your words. Saying you're confident means nothing if your body is asking for permission. Saying you don't care doesn't work if your actions reveal anxiety. The game is brutally honest at this point. It shows who you are, not who you say you are. And this is where a key principle of the cheat code comes in. Never try to control perception directly. The more you try to look like something, the less you actually are it. The right perception is created when your behavior comes from a stable inner state. You don't speed up to impress. You don't over-explain to justify yourself. You don't fill silence out of fear. You allow yourself to be comfortable, even in the pause, and that comfort gets interpreted as value. One of the most common mistakes is confusing attention with attraction. Talking too much, always being available, replying instantly, sharing too much about yourself. Your intention is usually connection, but the perception becomes something else: neediness. The game reads excess as lack, not because there's a moral rule, but because emotional balance breaks. Attraction needs space to breathe. Where there is no space, there is saturation. Perception is also built by how you handle the unexpected: a joke, a hidden test, an ambiguous comment. If you defend yourself, justify yourself, or get emotionally shaken, the perception changes instantly. It doesn't matter that you didn't intend it that way. Here's the hack, simple but demanding. Respond from your center, not from your ego. Sometimes with humor, sometimes with silence, sometimes by changing the subject without explanations. Another invisible part of the game, perception is based more on what you don't do than what you do. Not interrupting, not competing, not chasing constant validation. The absence of reactive behavior creates the image of solidity. The man who doesn't react to everything looks like he has options, and real or perceived options increase social value. Understanding that perception matters more than intention forces you into full responsibility. You can't hide behind, "I didn't mean it." All that's left is to observe yourself and adjust, not from guilt, but from clarity. If something didn't work, it wasn't because the other person didn't understand. It was because your communication wasn't congruent. And that's an advantage, not a problem, because anything that depends on you can be changed. The game changes when you start living from the inside out. You don't act to provoke a reaction. You act because it's natural for your internal state. And paradoxically, that's exactly what creates the strongest perception. You don't try to be liked, and that's why people like you more. You don't try to prove yourself, and that's why your value gets assumed. This hack isn't fast or superficial. It requires self-control, observation, and conscious practice. But once you integrate it, seduction stops being mental effort and becomes a natural consequence. Because in this game, perception isn't negotiated, it's projected. And when you learn to project from calmness, the whole board rearranges in your favor. In this game, there's one rule that cannot be negotiated. Value is not requested, it is embodied. The moment you try to convince someone of your value, you're already losing it. Asking for attention, seeking validation, explaining why you deserve interest, puts you in an inferior position. The real hack isn't in proving more, it's in needing less. When you don't depend on the response, your value becomes obvious, without words. And assuming value is not arrogance. It's not acting superior or looking down on others. It's firm neutrality. It's moving like someone who doesn't need permission to take up space. You say what you think without unnecessary decoration. You listen without anxiety to impress. You make decisions without fear that they won't like them. That calm decisiveness is rare, and that's why it attracts. The common mistake is confusing value with visible achievements, money, looks, status, interesting stories. All of that can add something, but it doesn't create value by itself. Real value is perceived in something deeper, how you handle social pressure. Whether you stay the same when there's interest and when there isn't, whether you change who you are to be liked or stay congruent even if it costs you attention. The game watches that with a microscope. Assuming value means accepting that not everyone will connect with you, and that's fine. You don't try to be liked by everyone. You don't over-explain when someone doesn't understand your position. You don't chase people who pull away. A man who assumes value doesn't react with resentment, and he doesn't react with begging. He simply adjusts his direction. That ability to let go without drama is a powerful signal of real self-esteem. Now here's an uncomfortable point. Many nice behaviors are actually hidden requests for approval. Laughing too much. Always being available. Constantly giving in on your boundaries. Always adapting. The intention might be good, but the perception is obvious. Fear of losing. Assumed value doesn't need to please people to survive. You help because you choose to, not because you fear rejection. You give attention when there is reciprocity, not to purchase affection. Another essential hack. Value is sustained through boundaries. Saying no without justifying yourself. Walking away when something doesn't fit. Not tolerating disrespect, even subtle disrespect. Every time you betray your standards just to keep attention, the game records it. And every time you stay firm without aggression, the board tilts in your favor. Because boundaries don't push away the right people, they filter out the wrong ones. Assuming value also means not competing, not comparing yourself to other men, not entering validation games, not trying to win conversations. Competition is born from inner scarcity. When you know who you are and what you offer, comparison becomes pointless. The game stops being against others and becomes against yourself, maintaining coherence between what you think, what you say, and what you do. Here's something counterintuitive. When you assume value, you might lose immediate opportunities. Some people will leave because they don't get control, constant attention, or easy validation. And that's part of the hack. Real value doesn't try to keep everyone. It tries to resonate only with those who are aligned. And in the long run, this filter increases the quality of your connections and reduces emotional exhaustion. The final point is this: nobody grants you stable value. You can receive interest, desire, attention, but value only stays if you assume it first. The game responds to the energy you carry, not to the arguments you present. When you walk with calm certainty that you are enough, without needing to prove it, effort disappears. And right there, exactly there, seduction stops being a struggle and becomes a natural consequence. One of the most repeated mistakes in this game is confusing attention with attraction. People think being present all the time, replying fast, showing constant interest, and filling every silence will create connection. The intention is usually good, so it doesn't get cold. So she doesn't forget me. But the perception is totally different. Attention without pauses communicates anxiety, and anxiety kills attraction. Tension is emotional expectation. It's the space between what is shown and what is felt. When everything is available, there is no mystery. When everything is explained, there is no curiosity. The game isn't fed by overexposure, it's fed by what remains suspended. The hack here is understanding this: more presence doesn't always increase value. Many times, it reduces it. Tension is born from balance. You get close enough to create connection, and you pull back enough so that connection doesn't become comfortable. Too much comfort kills interest. Not because she dislikes you, but because the emotional stimulus disappears. The brain responds to what it can't fully control, not to what it already has guaranteed. And here's a key principle: you are not obligated to always be available. Constant availability is not generosity. It's a lack of clear priorities. When your time seems unlimited, your value dissolves. The game interprets that the man who's always there has nothing else competing for his attention. And where there is no competition, there is no tension. Tension is also built through rhythm. Not everything needs to be immediate. Not everything deserves a response. Not everything requires an explanation. Silence, when used correctly, isn't punishment or manipulation. It's a natural pause. It's letting the interaction breathe. It allows the other person to process, imagine, and project. And in that space, a huge part of real attraction is created. Another common mistake is trying to secure interest with words, over-clarifying, over-reassuring, constantly confirming. Don't worry, I'm here. I care about you. Even though those words sound good, when repeated too much, they communicate fear of losing. Tension isn't maintained through the need to secure. It's maintained through the confidence that it's okay if something is lost. The game rewards the man who can pull back without resentment. You don't disappear to provoke. You disappear because you have a life that doesn't revolve around a single interaction. That clean withdrawal, without long explanations or drama, is one of the most powerful moves. Not because it manipulates, but because it reveals emotional independence. Tension also comes from not showing all your cards, not telling your whole story, not revealing all your intentions immediately, not defining the relationship too early. Clarity is important, but premature overclarity kills the emotional journey. Interest needs a process. Skipping stages out of anxiety only speeds up burnout. Here's something uncomfortable that few people accept. Attention involves risk. Risk that the other person pulls away. Risk that they don't like you. Risk that you can't control the outcome. That's why many people choose constant attention, because it gives the illusion of security. But the game doesn't run on illusions, it runs on real energy. And the energy of someone who doesn't fear losing is magnetically different. When you understand that tension is more powerful than attention, you stop trying to hold everything together. You allow pauses, you allow silence, you allow interest to not always be at its maximum, and paradoxically, that strengthens it. Because what isn't forced expands. The final hack here is simple, but it requires self-control. Don't fill the emptiness out of fear. Let the emptiness do its job. In that space, curiosity activates, anticipation activates, desire activates, and in this game, that is infinitely more valuable than being present all the time. In this game, there's an uncomfortable truth that most people avoid. What attracts the most is not what you say, not how you look, not how interesting you seem, but how much control you have over your own emotions. Not controlling them to suppress them, but controlling them so you're not ruled by them. The man who overflows, the man who overreacts, the man who gets easily shaken, communicates emotional dependence, and dependence kills attraction instantly. Emotional control isn't coldness or indifference, it's stability. It's being able to feel without losing your center. It's receiving stimulation, interest, rejection, ambiguity, silence, without your behavior becoming erratic. Because when your emotions dictate your actions, the other person feels like they have power over your inner state. And where power is unbalanced, attraction weakens. One of the biggest mistakes is believing that intense emotion creates deep connection. Intensity without control overwhelms. It may create a moment of impact, but it doesn't create stability. The game rewards regulated intensity, not emotional overflow. The emotionally stable person transmits safety, and safety is one of the strongest pillars of genuine attraction. Emotional control shows itself most in uncomfortable moments, when a message takes too long to arrive, when a response is ambiguous, when a subtle test appears, a light provocation, or an unexpected pullback. That's where most men expose themselves. They over-explain, they justify themselves, they rush ahead. They try to secure what isn't even at risk yet, and without realizing it, they communicate fear of losing. The hack here is simple in concept and difficult in practice. Don't react from impulse. Give yourself one internal second before you respond. Ask yourself, is what I'm about to do coming from choice or from anxiety? Emotional control doesn't eliminate emotion. It eliminates urgency, and when urgency disappears, value rises on its own. Another key point, emotional control allows you to stop personalizing everything. Not every silence is rejection. Not every distance is disinterest. Not every change in tone is a threat. The person without emotional control interprets everything as a critical signal and reacts accordingly. The person who has it observes, waits, and calibrates. That difference is felt even without words. And here's something counterintuitive. Showing that something affects you is not the problem. The problem is letting it control you. You can express discomfort, you can set a boundary, you can walk away if something doesn't sit right. That's control. What breaks the frame is losing your composure, starting to complain, dramatize, or chase immediate emotional validation. The game doesn't punish sensitivity, it punishes instability. Emotional control is built outside the interaction. In your daily life, your habits, your purpose, your ability to be okay alone. When your well-being depends on one person or one outcome, every interaction becomes tense. But when your foundation is solid, interactions feel lighter. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it doesn't define your worth. There's a deep reason why emotional control is so attractive. It communicates that you can handle complex situations without collapsing. And unconsciously, that gets associated with leadership, protection, and maturity. It's not a social trick, it's a biological and psychological signal. The man who stays firm under pressure is perceived as someone reliable. Now, the last point might be the most important. Emotional control is not something you use to seduce. It's something that transforms you. When you develop it, you stop needing constant strategies. You're no longer calculating every move. You're not trying to create a specific effect. You're simply present, centered, stable. And from that place, attraction stops being a chase and becomes a consequence. In this game, the person who controls their emotions controls their energy. And the person who controls their energy controls the frame. That's the kind of attraction you don't learn from lines or quick tactics. It's built from the inside, and once it's there, everything else becomes secondary. There's a point in the game where everything gets redefined. When you realize you're not there only to be chosen, you also choose. And that choice, when it's real, not fake, is deeply seductive. Most people enter the dynamic hoping for approval, reading signals to decide whether to advance or pull back depending on the other person's response. That puts you into reactive mode. The ultimate hack is to step out of that and reclaim the active role. Observe, evaluate, discard. Choosing doesn't mean rejecting out of ego or playing fake indifference. It means having standards. It means knowing what you want, what you won't tolerate, and what kind of energy doesn't match you. When you choose from clarity, your behavior changes naturally. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing lukewarm interest. You stop negotiating your dignity for intermittent attention. That silent firmness is felt strongly. The game changes completely when you stop trying to fit in at all costs. When you don't reshape your personality just to be liked. When you don't weaken your boundaries just to avoid making someone uncomfortable. Choosing means accepting that not every interaction should move forward. And instead of weakening attraction, it actually increases it. Because the man who can walk away without resentment shows he has internal options, even if he never shows them off. One of the most common mistakes is confusing patience with tolerance. Choosing also means knowing when something isn't flowing and not insisting. Not because you can't convince, but because you don't need to. Forced interest never becomes solid attraction. The game rewards the man who knows how to close doors without drama, not the man who keeps knocking on locked doors. Choosing is also seduction because it introduces a key element: conscious reciprocity. You don't give everything up front. You don't invest more than you receive. You don't speed up bonds that still don't have a foundation. This isn't coldness, it's balance. And when there is balance, the dynamic feels light, not tense. And that lightness is extremely attractive. There's something powerful about not rushing, about letting people reveal themselves, about observing how they treat time, boundaries, and interest. Choosing means listening carefully, not only to words, but to behavior. It's noticing inconsistencies without needing to confront them immediately. It's letting reality speak for itself before deciding whether to move forward. Choosing also involves responsibility. You can't blame someone else for dynamics you accepted. If you stay where you're not valued, that's a choice. If you tolerate constant ambiguity, that's a choice. The game becomes cleaner when you accept that power, not from guilt, but from awareness. What you choose defines the experience you live. This hack feels uncomfortable because it destroys the fantasy of external control. You stop waiting for someone to change, realize, or react the way you want. You simply decide whether it fits you right now. And that emotional autonomy is felt. It's not announced, it's not explained. It's perceived in how you move, how you speak, and how you leave when something stops adding value. Choosing is also seduction because it flips the energy of the interaction. You're no longer trying to be enough for someone. You're exploring whether the dynamic is good enough for you. That internal shift is subtle, but it transforms everything. Conversations become more authentic. Connections that move forward do so with more depth, and the ones that don't dissolve without conflict. And the final point is this: the most powerful seduction doesn't come from the desire to be loved. It comes from the ability to choose without fear of losing. When you choose from calmness, from self-worth, and from congruence, the game stops being a chase. It becomes a natural filter. And in that filter, only what is truly worth it remains.